So with that, we'll move on to graduation rates, the annual report. Dr. Swift.
Thank you, trustees, members of the community. We will be sharing our annual graduation report this evening. We do have our high school principals with us, and I want to thank them for being with us this evening. Mr. Paul DeAngelis will introduce them in just a little bit. I will review the data. That'll be our first analysis, and then we'll have Mr. DeAngelis come along with the principals down front, and they'll actually be sharing a little bit about our action plan that we're using to address this data. So let's look at kind of our approach here, trustees. You can see that we're using kind of a pyramid look here in working with graduation and ensuring that we are getting every student to graduation day and to seal that graduation with a handshake and a diploma. We use systems level approach, and in that approach, trustees, you've heard it from me, but we know that students today, I loved seeing these students from community, they want choices about their high school education. So our goal is to provide a portfolio of choices. They demand real-time learning. They want 24/7 opportunities to learn year-round, credit recovery, anytime, any place, flexible scheduling. We know that our students thrive and more of them finish their high school education when we provide lots of choices. On the strategic level, we're looking there at students who have particular needs. Most often, trustees, we are working with students who have fallen behind in their acquisition of credits. We want to be aware of that right away when it occurs, and we have a particular focus that we use with that strategic level of student in offering special programming and ensuring that our students get what they need. At the top of the pyramid, just like trustees a couple of weeks ago when we looked at behavior data, do you recall that we talked about that a particular level is about as far as you're going to get with systemic pieces? That beyond that level, we've really got to focus in on the individual child and ensuring that every student's needs are met. So our counselors, our teachers, we're using now a recapture approach, which means that sometimes students will separate from us, and then it may be a few weeks or months before they actually drop out, but we want to get them right at that moment before we lose contact with them. We're re-engaging students. We're using A2 virtual when that's helpful for them. We are using summer school in order to get those students to graduate, maybe even just 2 months after their scheduled date. It doesn't get them a 4-year achievement, but it does get them over the finish line. So let's take a look at the data, and then principals, if you will, come down so that you're close and we can have you weigh in shortly. Then you'll be ready when this part is over. Trustees, you're familiar with these kinds of graphs. We don't spend much time on them because in the Ann Arbor Public Schools, we really are focusing on the competitions with our own data. So we look year over year at where we are. Here is our look over 6 years. Trustees, just a friendly reminder that we do use the 6-year look because that 2011 cohort was the first cohort on Michigan merit curriculum. So just a friendly reminder for all of us that that change added 2 additional years of math, including Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. That happened in 2011, and then it also includes 3 years of science, and so the requirements ratcheted up, beginning with that class of 2011. So when we look at this data, we try to compare the same to the same. So all of these years, we've been going for the same target in achieving graduation. You can see that we've gained over that period of time 5.3%. We do see that over the previous 3 years, we're just hovering right at that 89% level. So trustees, you will hear from our executive director of high school and from our principals a very serious focus on how we're going to break through 90%. That is our goal, to really move beyond this place where we've been hovering for 3 years. This shows really how we examine our graduation data. So trustees, take just a moment and soak that slide in. You can see where we are on our subgroups compared to the state. We don't compare ourselves to the state much because we know we should be significantly above them. We pride ourselves in doing so. But I do want to point out 2 areas that don't look like all the others on this comparison, and that is the Latino Hispanic data, which is very near the state level, and then the economically disadvantaged student group, where we're also very near the state level. So these are 2 areas that are very much a focus of ours. And here we are looking at our own comparisons. We drew a line across the graph from the total for this year. So that blue line will help you to gauge where we are in our disparities as we look at where we want at least every student group to be achieving. And so we're very mindful, starting from the left there, our African American disparity still around 14 percentage points. We're doing a lot of work on that. Mr. DeAngelis and the team will be sharing more with you there. 2 or more races, although that one has narrowed significantly over the 6 years, there is still a small gap there. And then special ed students, that is our most significant gap at 28% under where our total is. And it also is an area with special ed student group where you see that we've moved very, very little. So we are concerned about that. You will see, though, in our 5- and 6-year cohort data that this number does come up over time. And we know that some students with an IEP will remain in our system through age 26. So we are mindful that that is a part of that data set also. Our economically disadvantaged group is the 4th area that we see the disparity, and we are very concerned that that group has not improved in their graduation rate. So you will hear, including trustees, our equal opportunity schools work and a number of other strategies, including our team that is working on the recapture. Ms. Leanne Dickinson-Kelly has a great team that you're going to meet in the next month that are working on this recapture data. We are very strongly focusing on these 4 areas where you see disparities in order to see breakthrough and to see movement. All right, that's just a chart of the same data. Sometimes trustees in our community like seeing it printed this way. Here's our county-wide comparison. As you know, trustees, we always spend time comparing to our own progress, and then we will go out in concentric circles. So here is our comparison to the other districts in the county. The blue line is running from where we are in 2016, and that will run across, and you can see how we compare to the other districts in the county. We are mindful of this data, but the next slide points to where we really focus. Is we choose the highest performing districts in the state, and we do benchmark against these 5 other districts consistently to see how we're doing. So that is the comparison to high-performing districts. We do this comparison with all of our critical data so that we are keeping our eye on other high-performing districts. And then the next slide is our comparable set of districts. There is no other district in Michigan that has our exact thumbprint. But there are districts that are more similar to us than others. So we will typically choose these same five. You can look back over time that we consistently use these same folks. This is also a peer group that we meet with members of these districts on a fairly regular basis to exchange ideas. So you can see how we compare to those districts that are most like us in the state. This is just a little reminder, trustees. I know you were very much aware of the change in 2011 with that class. And you see the arts credit was adjusted, the math credit was adjusted, and the science credit was adjusted. I'm really proud that we've continued to show gains despite a little steeper climb. Somebody raised the incline on the treadmill, and yet we are continuing to show gains. We want to double down and see a breakthrough here in 2017. This is our year. Yes, principals? It's our year. All right. Now we're going to look at our cohort categories. This is really fascinating data. There are just a few categories that you need to think about just for a second before we dive into it. On track graduated means they completed all their credits right on time in 4 years. That's what that means. Other completer means they went a different direction. So they either graduated through their GED or graduated through a certificate of completion, which does occur with some of our special needs students on an IEP, that they will go that path rather than a traditional graduation. Off track and continuing is a piece of data we're going to dive into because it's very exciting that we're seeing in Ann Arbor that when students don't complete in 4 years, we're working on getting them to stay with us. And that data is showing progress, although we want to see it progress more. The next category is one that we worry about a lot. That's our dropout and missing. We're not seeing them enrolled in any other district, and we're not seeing them enrolled in our own district. And then our exempt students, we do typically have a few of those, foreign exchange and other students who are exempt from the count. Very good. Well, let's take a look. Here's the chart, and you can see what it looks like. That 4-year rate, you can see our graduation and our dropout. You can see the 5-year rate as you go down over progressive years. We'll glance at this for just a minute, and you can see that dropout rate over time has come down. We bumped up a little bit this year, but I have a better way of looking at this, and Ms. Osinski will get us over to see this. As you can see, over time, we're getting more students to the goal of graduation. So while we're hovering around 89% in 4 years, when we see at the 5th year benchmark, we're moving toward 92%, and then at the 6-year benchmark, pushing toward 93%. So if you'll back up one, Ms. Osinski, there's one piece I wanted to show there. Off track and continuing, 4th column from the right, trustees. This is a very exciting column because it shows those kids, those students who are going to make the goal of graduation. It simply is going to take them a little bit longer. And you know, in the Ann Arbor Public Schools, we're just fine with that. We want to achieve the goal of graduation, and it's okay if it takes 5 years or 6 years or 7 years. We will keep our students going. So our goal, particularly with our recapture program and with programs like Pathways and with our credit recovery program, is to maintain students in our schools and continuing with their learning, even if their cohort group has already graduated. So let's jump ahead to there. And you can see the cohort standing alone. Trustees, I think this is another good way to take a look at this data to kind of see, there's our 4-year on time. Not everybody does it that way, but in the Ann Arbor Public Schools, about 89% of our students do achieve that graduation threshold on time in 4 years. Now let's look at our 5-year cohort. This is really exciting that as we've seen programs like Pathways come online, A2 Virtual, our folks that are really reaching out and bringing our students back, even our summer program, that if a student doesn't graduate on time in May or June, we're going to get them right in. And many times when they fail to graduate, it's just by a few credits. And so we want to get them right in at that point, and you can see that 5-year cohort moving toward 92%. And then our 6-year cohort, and you know that graph is a little bit shorter because of the longer span involved, but moving toward 93% on that 6-year time frame. And here's our school data. We break down by school so that folks can see where our individual schools are. We're very excited that Pathways has seen a tremendous progress over the time that they've been open this previous 3 years. Particularly, we've seen that number continue to go up, and then our other traditional high schools. What is the plan? What is the action plan? Because we're in a pact here to break through 90%. Trustees, it is my commitment and my goal, my personal goal and our shared goal that we'll be sitting at this table this time next year celebrating a rate above 90%. We want to be there. We want to get more students across the stage right on time at 4 years. We know when they don't graduate on time, they all of a sudden are at tremendously greater risk of not making that goal. So we want to get more across the stage on time. We also want to see the 5-year go up and the 6-year continue to increase. So the question we always ask in any set of data is what are our strategies? What are our plans? And trustees, you know I'm always thinking about what is the system plan, and then we're also looking at how our schools will implement. We have to do all of this within the budget that we have. And trustees, we're not going to go deeply into it tonight, but coming soon, along with your behavior interventionist presentation, is a presentation by this team that formerly would have been called the Truancy Team, and we're working on a great name for them, which is forthcoming soon. But it's 2 gentlemen who are actually going out to support students and find them and help them to get back to school. So I'm anxious for you to hear more about that, but that is a recent strategy that we've added. We've had some level of that all along, but we've recently added personnel there to get that more significantly in place. So what we always ask at this point, this is the question, trustees, is what things will be consistent across the system that are the promise we make to our high school students, and wherever you're in school, you're gonna get these things. And then what will be the things that are unique and special about each high school? But the bottom line being that we're not going to lose students between that 9th and 12th grade year. And so with that, I have asked Mr. DeAngelis and the principals here also to take any questions, and I do appreciate them being here. I'm mindful that we're pressing toward 9 o'clock and they have to be at school in the morning, but I do appreciate you being here. So let's hear about the strategies that we have in place and those that we're adding. Mr. DeAngelis.
Thank you. The great work that's being done is being done by the administrators behind me. Let me briefly introduce them. Corey McAmeal, principal at Skyline. Dr. Schwam, principal at Huron. Marcy, who's already been here, at the podium once from Community, and Mr. Weeks from Pathways. They are doing great work. One of the things that I did that was important for me in part of my transition early in the year was to meet with the principals and meet with their achievement teams to truly see the process as it plays out in their actual meetings and see the work that's being done to support students. And I couldn't be more impressed. Coming from a district that we compare ourselves to now, the work is as good, if not more comprehensive, than I've ever seen. They have clear plans in place for how they try to support all students. And so the outreach plan that we discussed and we began to frame in March when the data came out, first of all, we took the term outreach from the work that we're doing with our equal opportunity schools, and we've presented a little bit on that. But the key piece of the plan for the Equal Opportunity Schools Initiative is that there is an outreach plan on how an adult will reach out to every student, how we have a documented plan for how we track and the connections that we make with every student in the promotion of them accelerating themselves in a more rigorous curriculum. So we took that same term and applied it to an outreach plan for how we're identifying and tracking our at-risk students, because what we want to make sure of is that we're not losing any students in some of the key transitional moments, especially from right now through the end of the summer, when we can get these students graduated and count them in our 4-year cohort. So the principals with their teams have been working on making sure they have clearly identified any student who's in jeopardy of not reaching their credit total prior to June. Any student that needs summer school support, there is a plan in place, including an outreach coordinator, a staff member who is documented on this plan, that is making contact with that student on a regular basis. And then there is clear communication to our summer school principals to make sure that they understand exactly where that student is in the path to graduation. So it's just a connection between them leaving one of their comprehensive high schools or community or pathways going into the summer school program with still the opportunity to graduate. And as Dr. Swift mentioned, the other piece of this is if we can't graduate them in 4 years, then what are we doing to make sure that we don't lose them and that they continue on in that 5th year? And so that's where Mr. Weeks takes over in his program. That's where our recapturing or truancy program gets notified through this plan, that if a student doesn't complete in 4 years, that we have a clear plan in place for how they're transitioning to the Pathways program, or how if we feel that they're potentially not going to come back to us or we're going to lose them somehow in that transition, that we would make sure that our recapturing plan is in place and that they're aware of where they are, of where those students are and how they're going to be brought back into the system for graduation. I just want to put a few numbers to this, and these are the numbers that I shared with the principals. We see percentages, but oftentimes in order to personalize this, you really have to understand the numbers. So in 2016, we had 151 students that didn't graduate. That's the real number. You see percentages sometimes, you say, well, how many is that? It was 151 students that didn't graduate. And as I pointed out to them, even if we could get that number just to 100, and certainly our goal is to get it even less than that, but even if we could just get it to 100, the number that you'll see up here on the board next year would be 93%, a significant increase, and would put us in the ballpark with all of our peer districts and all of those districts by which we compare. And so I'm proud of the response that I've received from them. I'm more proud of the work that they do on a regular basis. And it was very easy for me to kind of just frame this outreach plan because it really was based on the work that I already see being done very, very well in the buildings. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, great.
All right. This is really important. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, too, on a school night especially. So thank you so much.